All right, we're getting situated. Cool. How's everyone doing?
Good. How are you?
Doing well, doing well. Fall treat you guys okay?
Awesome.
Awesome. Well, it is certainly a pleasure and a privilege to have the ability to coordinate this meeting. So I want to go ahead and thank your staff for taking the time to arrange it. It truly means a lot to us here at Headstrong to have the opportunity to broadcast to you guys from Nick's house. Certainly over the years, Springfield College has, meant a lot to us as an ambassador in New England, and just a great arm of support. Coach Bugby has truly, embraced our cause, and I think it's important that you guys take some time to, better understand, in fact, what it is that you're involved with, the amazing things that we're doing as a resource to families across the country that have been devastated by the realities of cancer. And, more importantly, helping you guys to fully be able to digest the mission and really pump you guys up. I think it's incredible that all of you all are taking part in Lacrosse Mustache Madness, and what is that competition and campaign, and what does that mean to the organization, and what are the roots, and more importantly, what exactly is the impact? And that's something that I felt it was very important to share with you all. I think there's a lot of you that may be aware of the Headstrong Foundation and maybe have heard of it, have seen the lime green shoelaces, but maybe don't necessarily understand maybe the backstory, or in fact, what it is that we actually do. And more importantly, I want to share with you guys the need and why we need you. And I think, what I want to be able to do tonight through this little session is to also address maybe some of the questions that you all may have about this campaign, maybe the expectations that you have for yourselves as a team, and and obviously how weaving Headstrong into your team is something that we're truly honored to be part of, and certainly I think today's a great opportunity for us to kind of get to know one another, if you will. Let me tell you that Nick was my brother. I was the oldest. My brother Nick was sandwiched right in between my younger two brothers, Nick and Dan. And he was a young man who, was just charismatic in nature. How many of you, by a show of hands, were in a situation where when you were coming up as a student athlete, that a coach had asked you guys to possibly do something outside of your comfort zone at a certain point in time or another? For instance, maybe try a new position. It's so funny. It's almost everybody in the room. And that's something that my brother Nick experienced as well. He was a 3-sport athlete in high school. He was a young man who had a very bright future. He was a young man who always led by example. I'm sure you guys have a player on your team that has the ability to rise above maybe their physical limitations and be able to just have the determination and the motivation to lead by example in a way that elevates the play of everyone else around them. And that was, in fact, the type of individual that my brother was. And, and I pause there and say, individual. My brother was not, in a sense that he knew to be part of something bigger than himself. And he bought into that wholeheartedly. And whether it was football, whether it was wrestling, whether it was lacrosse, you could always expect that Nick Calalori was coming up with that big play, coming up with that big sack, or that change in that change in a game that certainly affected the momentum. And with that being said, I'll put it into perspective. Nick was 5'10", and he was 165 pounds. He was an all-state first-team nose guard in football here in the state of Pennsylvania. In 8th grade, he pinned his wrestling coach. And when he was asked to be a close defenseman his senior year at Ridley High School, he accepted the challenge. He had played midfield his entire life. Again, desire to be the difference on a team. And he led a team to an undefeated season his senior year. And while he was at Ridley, he was a 3-time state champion. But the reality is that, you know, the one thing that drove my brother was the idea of benefiting from being part of a team. He loved the idea of, you know, of giving it all on the field. There were certainly plenty of times when my brother, because of exhaustion, was carried off the field. And he was a guy that any one of you would have been honored to take the field with. And more importantly, he would have been honored to take the field with you. See, you know, being part of a team, you guys are a unit. You guys are a family. You know, you hold the rope for one another no matter how much it may burn. And that's something that my brother personified every day and simply demonstrated, especially in his battle with cancer. Now, my brother Nick was essentially a walk-on to Hofstra University's lacrosse team. He was recruited, but when John Danowski was there, you know, they were pretty much set at the defensive position. And my brother, after his first practice in the fall of 2005, ended up coming in and meeting with John Danowski and said, "Hey, coach, you know, what do I need to do to see the field?" And John kind of paused for a moment and said, "You know, Nick, I would focus more on, you know, let's crack in the roster first." And Nick's like, "I'm not here to do anything but move the needle for this program, and I'm not here to sit on a bench. I'm here to do everything that it takes to be part of making this team better. And I want to see the field. I'm not here to just be, you know, be average. I want to be the best." And so simultaneously, Nick was paired against a young man by the name of Jack Vivinetto. And Jack was a 4-time All-American from Rocky Point, New York. And Jack is now a Navy SEAL, just to put things into perspective. And the work ethic that my brother possessed was something that truly resonated with the Hofstra coaches. And as a result, he actually earned himself not only a slot on the roster, but in fact, they made Jack Vivinetto a redshirt freshman Nick's freshman year. And by the end of the year, Nick was starting as a part of the Hofstra Pride. So, you know, with that being said, the reason why I'm telling you this is because I want you to have a better understanding of the type of individual that Nick was. You know, despite all the accolades that he had achieved, one thing that was consistent was that, you know, it was never about himself. It was always about others. And it was always about giving unrelentingly, you know, and just giving his all to make a difference, no matter what it was, whether he was a camp counselor, whether he was somebody, you know, in school. He made time for a lot of people. And that was a consistent theme throughout his life, was that he knew what made him happy, you know. And I think most of us spend our lives, you know, searching for that happiness. And that's something that I can honestly say, young man, 19 years old, knew and had the love of his life, knew what he wanted to become, a teacher and a counselor and a coach, and just aspired to simply come back to his community where he grew up and give back and make a difference. Interestingly enough, 2 weeks into his sophomore year, our left turn, and we learned that he had cancer. At 19 years old, my brother Nick was terminally diagnosed with diffuse non-Hodgkin's lymphoma. Diagnosis, playing the best lacrosse of his life, he was told he had 3 months to live. And in wake of the diagnosis, he refused to accept it. And he said, you know what, I can handle this diagnosis. So if you guys could envision right now, because most of you guys are at this age, can you imagine getting called into a coach's office, being met by your parents and your coach and a team of physicians and being told that you had 3 months to live? That's essentially what my brother was handed. And as a result, rather than focus on himself, focused on everyone else but himself. 5 minutes after being diagnosed and learning of his diagnosis, he went down to address his team in his locker room. And he told his teammates what had happened. He explained that he was withdrawing from school that day and he was returning home to begin treatment. And he didn't want tears, that he wanted people to know that he was strong enough to fight this and they were going to do it together as a team. You see, you guys read a lot of things, right? Tragedy affects teams all over the country, okay? And, you know, knowing that this was an unfortunate circumstance which would have crumbled many, I think the Hofstra pride took a lot of pride in knowing that, you know, that Nick, if anybody was going to fight this thing head on, it was going to be him. And if there was anybody that was going to unite folks in a fight against cancer, it was going to be him. You see, Nick looked at cancer as an opportunity. And his experience through the disease was something that essentially carved the path of now the Headstrong Foundation, which has become his vision. To give you guys a better perspective, Nick withdrew from Hofstra and began treatment immediately at the University of Pennsylvania under the direction of Dr. Steve Schuster. And they hit Nick with everything that you could imagine. 21 rounds of targeted radiation, 14 rounds of chemotherapy, a bone marrow transplant, a stem cell transplant, and unfortunately, nothing worked. And all the while, as my brother and our family began to experience this unplanned for journey, we also realized that there were a lot of people around us that didn't have support, that were struggling significantly, that were traveling so far away from home and the comforts of their loved ones and support system. And we started to realize that we were so fortunate to have the support of family, the fact that we were living 15 minutes away from the medical center where Nick received treatment, the fact that, you know, Nick was who he was as far as the type of mental capacity and emotionally, you know, the strength that he possessed physically and emotionally. But he also realized a couple things, that cancer just doesn't affect the person, that there's this ripple effect that gets sent through a family, a community. And with that being said, you know, that really began to bother Nick. You see, Nick was 19, and as a 19-year-old, he started to answer, you know, he started to ask questions, but more importantly, Nick was the type of person that got stuff done. So when he would go into the hospital, you know, Nick would address things like, why does the food have to be so bad? How come I can't watch the game on TV because the cable, you know, they don't have the channel that I need to watch? Or, you know, I want to be able to, you know, this was at a time, believe it or not, technology's changed so much. I mean, I'm literally interfacing with you guys, you know, in Massachusetts right now, and I'm sitting in Philadelphia, but this technology never existed 10 years ago. So the reality is that, you know, John Danowski would overnight Nick game tapes, you know, and the things that bothered Nick was like, you know, my mom, who's my caregiver, you know, how come she can't stay in a comfortable bed? And more importantly, you know, we started to experience some difficult financial times as far as the medical bills that would start to amount. And with that being said, my brother Nick battled for 14 months. And in that time, his medical expenses had surpassed $1,000. And we had great insurance. And we were 15 minutes away from home. But the reality was that a lot of things that were kind of happening on the fly, because when you're dealt this hand of cancer, you kind of live in like a moment-to-moment scenario where things change on a dime. And flexibility is something that is a virtue. And honestly, it's something that we all kind of take for granted. Like, you guys are on a pretty regimented schedule. You wake up, you may work out, you may have practice, you have team meetings, you know where you need to be. You have classes, you have meals, etc. But imagine if your routine was abruptly interrupted by blood work, chemotherapy, a scan, a doctor's appointment. These are the type of scenarios that affect patients across the country. And not everybody has a caregiver in their corner. Not everybody has the flexibility to leave a job. And when they do, it comes at a major financial toll to their family. So think about this. Cancer is something that just doesn't go away. Quite frankly, it lives with you for the rest of your life, whether you're in remission or not. And the reality is that if you're a child, you have a guardian, and I'd be honest, I have 2 children. If my child has the flu or a cold, I'm questioning going to work, let alone cancer. So anyway, families start to navigate without a lot of clarity. And they start to struggle financially when they're trying to sustain their households with 50% less income. And on top of that, what happens when somebody isn't responding to treatment? Because guys, the reality is more people do not respond to treatment than that do. And that's really been kind of the front runner for why things like immunotherapies have been so important, you know, as far as, you know, the development of groundbreaking treatment. Is that groundbreaking treatment isn't accessible everywhere. So families are put in a position where they have to travel to areas that do have treatment, whether it be certain infusions, certain clinical trials. And what happens is that you could be dealing with a family that's been ill for, you know, 6 years. I mean, the average treatment regimen for a child with pediatric leukemia is 36 months. It's 3 years of your life. The entire duration of your college experience, these kids have been spending in the hospital. So when my brother Nick would go into treatment, he started to realize all these hardships that families all around him were experiencing. And he understood that he had a platform through college athletics and the sport of lacrosse to make a difference. He also was determined to share his experience through the disease publicly in hopes of benefiting other people. So Nick was a guy who got things done on the field, and he took that same tenacity to getting things done in the hospital. And he started to address real problems plaguing the patient and family population. And treatment, the longest he had stayed in the hospital was 45 days. Guys, spend 45 minutes in a hospital. 5 days. I mean, that's the reality that he faced. And when he was in the hospital, he really, that was a time where, honestly, we as a family, we made a pact. And it was that no matter what, we would never leave Nick alone, because we always wanted him to know that no matter what he was facing, we were facing together. And that's something when you think about the importance of being part of a team, and in the course of a season, with the ups and the downs and the peaks and the injuries and the unexpected things that happen, you guys are going to get through it together, okay? And that's what we did as a family. And so with that being said, you know, for 45 days, we all did our part. And with a situation where when you're facing your mortality or that of your loved one, you have no regrets because everything's out on the table. And during that time, my brother started to create from a hospital bed this organization called Headstrong. Now, his nickname was Head, and his attitude was headstrong. And he was very focused on helping families navigate this cancer journey by sharing that experience of our own family and also addressing the problems facing the patient population. So improving quality of life and helping families to live with a greater sense of normalcy became the focus of what Headstrong does. So what does that mean? That means being able to tackle every challenge from financial assistance to emotional support to providing housing for families. Now, while Nicholas was undergoing treatment and this bone marrow transplant, which required him to be inpatient, we started to meet other families. And the reality is that we actually encountered a family while standing in line to pay for parking. A day, guys, 7 days a week. It's $210 a week to pay for parking at the hospital. Okay? We encountered a family car. They were financially exhausted to the point that they were forced to come to Philadelphia, where we're based, to receive treatment. Their daughter was in need of a bone marrow transplant, just like my bro. And the reality is that they could not afford a hotel. So they were taking shifts, sleeping in their car. At the time, my mother and father had an empty bedroom. So they welcomed this family back to our home, and it started to shed light on a major issue. The fact is that not everybody had a comprehensive cancer center in their backyard. And not everybody had access to clinical trials and specialty physicians and proton radiation, etc. In fact, there was a large population of people that were coming to where we were that needed help and that needed a place to stay, and that otherwise would forgo treatment because of the convenience of them not having anybody, or the financial or the affordability. So this equation is pretty simple. Accessibility and affordability dictate treatment. If you're in Salt Lake City, Utah, and you're diagnosed with a treatment and you're not responding to it, and there's a clinical trial that's being offered in Philadelphia, where do you think you're going? You're coming to Philadelphia. If you're in Philadelphia and there's a clinical trial being offered in Seattle, Washington, guess where you're going? Seattle, Washington. That's the reality, boys. So anyway, so back in 2011, Headstrong opened a home called Nick's House. And Nick's House serves that purpose of being able to provide complimentary lodging for patients and families that are displaced to this region seeking these life-saving treatments. And right now, we have a 9-month-old that's with us. Her name's Holly. And Holly's from Western Maryland. Her family's traveled 5 hours to stay here at Nick's House. They will be with us for 3.5 months while she undergoes proton radiation. I spent the day with her family yesterday. They're a young family. Here's the sad part. They have 2 older boys, 8 and 5, who they haven't seen in 2 months. So we're talking about a disease that's dividing families. We see families all over the country. For 6 years now, we've operated Nick's House. We've welcomed families from more than 18 states, hundreds of families, providing them with long-term housing so that they can pursue these clinical trials. And I'm proud to say that on December 13th of this year, we're going to be opening up our second Nick's House. This is an 8,000 square foot family home that's been retrofitted to support the unique needs of patients and families. It is ADA compliant. It will provide 2,500 nights of complimentary housing. Gentlemen, this is the house that Lacrosse built, literally. When my brother Nick was in the last days of his life, he asked our family to see his vision of Headstrong into fruition, and we made him that promise. For the past 10 years, our family has worked alongside of countless others on our team, and we have built an amazing support system for when families have the rug ripped out from under them. To date, we've assisted more than 14,000 families from around the country, and we've channeled more than 90 cents of every dollar raised and have distributed and allocated more than $10.5 million in assistance so that families like ours can better navigate the storm of cancer. So financial assistance is so imperative. Lodging and support, it's critical. Realizing that, services intended to improve the inpatient experience is what we also specialize in. We're active in the hospital. Guys, what's amazing about Headstrong is that we're not just a pass-through for funds. In fact, we're actually a direct support service. So we are family services. When your family experiences the hardship of a cancer, they turn to Headstrong, and Headstrong helps them through their darkest times of their life. You know, the sport of lacrosse has been deeply affected by this cancer world. Just on October 18th, we lost a young man by the name of Sean Dixon. Last year, Sean Dixon, who is a lacrosse player from Oceanside High School, was diagnosed with an osteosarcoma. Sean was the benefactor of our financial assistance, and last year did a video promoting Lacrosse Mustache Madness, which I posted yesterday. On October 18th, Sean lost his battle. He was 16 years old. That's the reality, gentlemen, is that these kids, they're fighting for their lives. Their mothers and fathers are stressed and emotionally devastated, financially shot, and that's when we step in. You see, Nick felt that, and we feel that, you know, there are more people now living with cancer than ever. And yet this is kind of a topic that gets overshadowed all the time. It's trying to help these folks, you know, because people think that there's a lot of strides being made, which there's a ton. But those strides somebody has to pay for. And a lot of times the financial toxicity that sets in with these families, unfortunately, is just as devastating as the cancer itself. So anyway, so this campaign, Mustache Madness, was started 9 years ago by Ken Clausen and myself. And this campaign that you guys are participating in emulates the last 6 weeks of my brother Nick's life. His birthday was October 19th, so we start the campaign on October 19th. Nick passed away on November 28th, and that's when we conclude this program. Over the 6-week period, our effort is to raise $200,000 for the 200,000 families that'll be diagnosed with cancer over the 6 weeks. Guys, the latter part of my brother's life, he went from being a 205-pound solid kid to wheelchair bound at 120 pounds. He had mobility issues. One of the most devastating things for me as an older brother, in the mirror and just be so defeated by something so out of his control. It broke my heart. And to be quite honest with you, you know, it's something that I wish that none of you have to ever witness. You know, I can tell you that my brother lived life to the fullest. But, you know, one thing that I take great pride in is knowing that anymore, that we have something that we can cling to that will see to it that his legacy lasts longer than we all do. And I can honestly say that, you know, one thing that bothered my brother when having cancer was the way that others kind of looked at him. And that shed light on our mission, this desire to just want to be normal again, just wanting to be back on the lacrosse field. You know, my brother Nick would occasionally say, when I'm back at Hofstra and I'm on the field, I don't have cancer. I'm part of something bigger than myself. And all that what I'm going through in life right now doesn't matter because I'm in the moment. And when I'm on the field, I'm just Nick and I'm not this sick patient. And that's all he desired. And I can honestly tell you guys, you know, cherish every opportunity that you have on the field. When my brother had lost all this weight and he was confined to a wheelchair, I can tell you the things that got him through his darkest days was the idea of possibly one day having the chance to play lacrosse again. And you know what? In the latter part of his life, he grew a mustache because he was tired of talking to him about how he was feeling. But look at me. If that doesn't say I feel terrible, then you know what I mean? But sometimes people just don't know what to say. So my brother grew a mustache, and it was a way to kind of be like, oh, dude, you grew a mustache? Like, it took the conversation away from something negative, like the fact that he was dying. And the fact is that it put it into a positive light and was like, made it somewhat humorous and tolerable that the fact that he was feeling so ill. And more importantly, the conversation was not directed into him having cancer. So when you guys grow your mustaches, know that those mustaches are a statement, and know that gentlemen, that those mustaches are also something that my brother clung to in an effort to just feel normal in the last weeks of his life. And so, you know, that is kind of what we're doing here with this campaign. I can honestly tell you that we have had an incredible amount of support this year. In fact, the last recent numbers were at $105,488 as of right now. And we're 7 days into the month of November. We have 1,142 growers, 74 colleges like yourselves, ability to do something great. And so I wanted to certainly, you know, empower you guys to get out there, start growing those mustaches, use them to raise these funds that these families need, because, you know, when you see these kids and you see these families going through these lengths to just see another day,
We lost you guys. Can you still hear us? No. Anybody got any ideas? Nothing? What? Motherfuckers. Yes.
All right, good. That was ridiculous. But anyway, so as I was saying, gentlemen, you know, I felt it was, you know, incredibly important to be able to kind of convey to you guys, you know, what we do here at Headstrong every day, you know, what we're devoted to, what we're committed to. I wanted you to better understand who my brother was, you know, why this campaign exists, why it's so important. I hope I answered, you know, a lot of the questions that maybe you guys had. I mean, fundraising is simple, guys. You guys already have a team set up. You're already, you know, you're already raising funds as it is. We want to certainly kick the effort up, especially as we, you know, head into this next phase. We do this lax stash competition where you guys are actually going, I believe your first match is scheduled against Lions. No, let me see here. To LIU Post, actually, is who you guys are going head to head against starting tomorrow. And what we do is we evaluate your incremental fundraising gain over the course of 3 days, and then winners will advance. Are you all receiving my email communications? Any chance? Everybody raise your hands if you're receiving them. All right, cool. Be sure to check those out. There's different contests and different things like that that, you know, are intended to better educate you on successfully fundraising. There's a file that has some great content in it for you guys that we've taken the liberty of creating. It's check the emails. You can go right into those and you can pull videos, you can pull PowerPoints, you can pull assets, photos, and even social media content. That all you need to do is copy and drop into your feeds or into your posts and encourage people to give. You know, one thing that I'm going to encourage you guys to do is, you know, $150 is essentially what it costs to house a family per night here at Nick's house. And I encourage you to use that as kind of a benchmark to fundraise nights at Nick's house as a team. I think that could be a great way for you guys to encourage folks to be part of this. And like I said, if there's any questions that you guys have, I'd love to answer them now. I don't know if there's Devin, if Devin wants to act as kind of like an ambassador, or, you know, is there any questions that you guys have? Feel free to ask.
How many families have you actually housed over the years?
Did you hear that, Pat?
Say that one more time, Devin.
How many families have you housed over the years?
Over the years, we've been at 100% occupancy. It has been 82 families, and they've traveled from all over the country. Now, this new house that we're opening on December 3rd will be able to support 195 families a year. Okay. Any other questions?
I think that's it, Pat. I think you hit the nail on the head.
All right, gentlemen. Like I said, be sure to get social, Headstrong FND on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, etc. Follow along, you know, like I said, I mean, we want you guys to be successful and surpass your fundraising goals. I really think that you guys are a special group, and I know you're going to make us proud. And like I said, I mean, I expect some great things out of you guys, because you're one of the teams that really has like some